Hi. Oh, we're live. Emily.
Yeah. How are you? There's a lot of you. So my TA in Australia, I don't know when you can show up. I don't have anything coaching. My little 5 minutes. Feel a little underpowered.
But I'll have another good one. Oh, I mean,
Hey, Sandy.
I know.
Yeah. See you there.
I feel like you're
No, I'm a little bit under the weather, so I'm trying to just figure out how to get through that. Yeah, I just wait till Saturday. I can sort of take a little bit. You doing okay?
Yeah. Looking forward to this.
Don't get your hopes up.
Yeah, right. Don't disappoint, Derek. So where do we sit? Looks like we have our
I know, because I'm sick.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, hi everybody, welcome. Thank you for coming. This is the State of Ethnic Studies, LGBT Studies and FGSS Studies Town Hall. We'd like to thank everybody for coming out to this. We're hoping that everyone here is here today because they're a part of these wonderful programs, and if they're not, then they're interested in becoming part of these programs. Or maybe you've never even heard of any of this stuff and you just really want to learn more. My name is Barbara. I'm a sophomore government major, minoring in many things, but among those Asian American Studies and Latina Studies. And I'm a part of LAL, which is the umbrella Latinx org here on campus.
Hey everyone, I'm Beatrice. I'm a math major with a concentration in computer science. I think I'm part of APAA, but I just joined. Yeah, I just wanted to thank all the faculty for coming, for spending a lot of time preparing the statements that they're going to make and helping us frame our future conversations. And Barbara will just go over the structure of today's meeting.
Yeah, so the first half hour is essentially going to be these wonderful faculty and staff sort of introducing these programs, talking about the history, giving us an overview of the programs, what it is and what they mean, what they were born out of. Then moving on and talking about the current state of these programs and sort of what obstacles there are in expansion and moving forward, as well as where they hope the future of the program lies. After that, we're going to be breaking into small group discussions to begin moving into a Q&A session, and it'll be pretty open, relaxed, and yeah, so learn a lot, hopefully.
There's pizza outside, and you should get it outside. If you're eating inside, you won't tell anyone.
Without further ado, right? These are the wonderful people we're having today. If we can have introductions starting on that end, just sort of say, I guess, your name, what department you're representing, and let's do a quick introduction, moving down the line, and then we can start into the 5-minute speech. Okay, cool.
I'm Troy Richardson. I'm with the American Indian Studies program.
Can you speak up just a little bit, Troy?
Sure. Again?
No, I heard you, but I'm in the front row.
So I'm Derek Chang. I'm in the history department and in Asian American Studies, and I'm the current director of the Asian American Studies program.
I'm Gerard Atching from Africana Studies as well as from Romance Studies. I was the director of Africana until last week.
I'm Kathleen Long. I'm in the Department of Romance Studies, and I'm the director of Feminist Gender and Sexuality Studies.
I'm Judith Moreno. I'm a professor in music and the director of LGBT Studies program.
I am Hector Gales. I'm the interim director of the Latino Studies program, and that's my name up there with the accents. I don't know why, but it's very well written. I love it.
Yeah, we could just launch right in.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation to share a little bit about the American Indian and Indigenous Studies program here at Cornell. I want to start by just acknowledging that Cornell is situated on the traditional territories of the Cayuga Nation, who are still struggling to reclaim a small part of their once ancestral territories. And invite you to come to the American Indian and Indigenous Studies program to learn more about how you can develop some kind of allied relationship to that project. I don't know, maybe going backwards in terms of the pressing issues for Indigenous studies. I think in the context of the territories of the Cayuga Nation, I think we struggle primarily to get Cornell to acknowledge that that's where they're located. And the unwillingness to do that is just another example of the machinery of settler colonialism. So as an intellectual project, I think Indigenous studies more broadly has as its primary target and challenge is settler colonialism, and the ways in which it continues to erase the presence of Indigenous peoples and their ongoing struggles for land and sovereignty. So that's I think some of the biggest challenges. We can see that in terms of the installation, the art installation that was recently kind of discussed and pushed back against on campus. It's just that couldn't happen if there weren't for the ongoing erasure of Indigenous peoples, or at least a significant conversation with us as a program, for example, in the more local immediate experience. So that's kind of some broad sweeps in terms of what the future of our intellectual work is about. So under that broad heading, we have legal studies issues, law, history, role of gender and the erasure of Indigenous people, sexuality, and so on. So as an intellectual space, these are the kinds of questions and topics that we're concerned with going forward. The history, how do we get here to now? I'm going to give you a very kind of abbreviated, and I'm by far not the best one to relate this story. I'm kind of sitting in for Jane Pleasant, who's much more versed in this history, having been here for over 25 years, I believe. The program started about 30 years ago in a formal sense. This would have been maybe more than 30 years now, in the late 70s. And it was born of a not dissimilar set of circumstances around the need for programs nationally, or excuse me, institutions nationally, to begin to address the concerns of Indigenous peoples. And again, primarily in the context of law and land and resource extraction. So it's in that context here that Cornell's American Indian Indigenous Studies program started. In the College of Agriculture and Life Science, which is not accidental, many of the kind of First Nations people, local First Nations people, Mohawks in particular, were the ones to attend Cornell in the field of agriculture. And there was a kind of both targeted and not so thought out kind of direction to that effort in terms of agriculture and indigeneity, and there's a lot of kind of obvious stereotypes operative in that context. But at its best, it was really driven by the needs and interests of Mohawk and other Haudenosaunee peoples in the local communities. And so it's in that context that a much longer arc of the 20th century is involved in talking about Indigenous studies and Indigenous peoples at Cornell University. But since the late 70s, the American Indian Indigenous Studies programs has developed and really kind of both flourished and like other programs, found moments of extreme challenge. At its most positive flourishing, we have our own in-house academic advising and academic component and recruitment. And we don't take those for granted. We work very hard to build up some very specific relationships to both the Haudenosaunee communities, who we feel responsible for as a program and as an institutionally situated program, to try and meet in a direct way the needs of the communities that territories that we're in. And so we have our in-house recruitment and in-house kind of academic program services, as well as the full array of academic courses and other kind of research and intellectual projects that fall under the umbrella of Indigenous Studies and American Indian Studies. And this is a global endeavor. We have affiliated faculty working with Indigenous peoples around the world. And again, primarily in areas now on resource extraction, law, and related kind of sociocultural issues that stem from that. So my 5 minutes is probably up, so I'll stop there. If you have questions, we have plenty of folks, and please, as I said, take a look at our homepage. We've got lots of events to take part in.
So So I'm going to read mostly from this in order to keep me to 5 minutes because I tend to go on. But first, I want to sort of thank the organizers of this particular event. It's incredibly exciting to be in this room with some of my colleagues here, but also with all of you who are interested in ethnic studies. This is, to my mind, rare, if not unprecedented. So, in my experience at Cornell. So thank you for pulling this together. So I'm representing Asian American Studies, which in its sort of broadest form is interdisciplinary field concerned with the study, obviously, of people of Asian descent and hemispheric Americans. Now our concerns generally revolve around broadly issues of social formation, things like race, nation, ethnicity, class, gender. It includes scholars who locate their disciplinary homes within anthropology, English, history, sociology, political science, visual studies, film studies, urban studies, and cultural studies, in addition to those trained in inter and multidisciplinary ethnic studies, American studies, and gender studies. So at Cornell, which has been, I think, one of the most important institutions in the formulation of the field, we see Asian American studies as both transnational and comparative or relational. The scholarly and intellectual understanding is manifested in our minor course of study, which requires students to take at least one class in Asian studies and at least one class in either Latino studies, African American studies, American Indians, and Indigenous studies, or FGSS. The program itself administers an undergraduate minor and houses a resource center, and we work closely with the Asian and Asian American Center on campus for programming and in support of student organizations. So we actually were founded in 1987, the first Asian American Studies program in the Ivy League, one of the few on the East Coast and one of the few east of, as we say in the field, east of California. 87 is sort of an odd year. I've done a little bit of historical research into the sort of roots of the Asian American Studies program, and we can see it coming out of the same sort of social movements that form Africana in the late 60s that begin to sort of bubble up around the rest of the country. So that there are conferences at Cornell calling for ethnic studies in 1971, 1972, and 1973. The early to mid 80s also becomes a moment of organization around questions of ethnic studies and Africana studies, particularly pivoting around questions of affirmative action and the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. And so we can sort of locate some of the tributary sort of sources that move toward the foundation of the Asian American Studies program here. We currently have just 3 faculty, and in its sort of most sort of I guess the crassest terms, right? The thing that stymies us the most in Asian American Studies is the lack of resources. In 2003, until 2003, we were budgeted for only 3 faculty members. In response to the work of a coalition of students in early 2002, the Provost's office established a task force for ethnic studies, which among other things recommended increasing the number of faculty in each ethnic studies unit. As a result, in Asian American Studies, we soon saw our faculty allotment grow. So for a brief time, we had 4 and at one point 5 faculty. In response to budget cuts in 2008, we grudgingly cut, and we talk about that grudgingly part, half of the faculty position. And since the departure of our 4th faculty member in 2014, we've not been able to hire a replacement. So in terms of our biggest challenges, right, maintaining a curriculum that can support an undergraduate minor only, much less expand to perhaps an undergraduate major, which students called for last year, or a graduate minor field of studies, our sort of small faculty tends to be the most significant impediment. I'd say that those structural issues, right, which have to do with the allotment of faculty positions, with the fact that we have to hire as a program with a tenuring department, those structural issues, I think, will only be exacerbated in the coming years, given our recent events. As questions of nativism, white supremacy, immigration restriction, misogyny, homophobia continue to take center stage in our current political climate, I think the demand for and importance of the courses we all teach will surely increase.
I'd like to thank the organizers for doing this. As Keith also said, it's unprecedented, so that it's very important for you to be here, for us to be here, and to have this conversation. Let me just give you a brief history of Africana, and then talk about some of the issues that face us all. First of all, Africana began in 1969. It's one of the first in the country. There were two, the one in San Francisco State and then the one here at Cornell. So it's historical in that sense, the establishment of Africana. The term Africana itself was invented here at Cornell, and by that we mean the study of peoples of African descent all over the world. We've often spoken of Africa and the African diaspora, but we know that this is also of African descended peoples all over the world. Now, today we can look at Africana as an institute, as a research center, and also as a place for community discussion. Africana began with that idea of research, but also with the idea of engagement, with the communities here in Ithaca and on campus. That's been very important to us. And in that sense, the ways in which the university is going in terms of engaged Cornell and so on, it puts us somewhere, and all of us, towards the sort of center of what Cornell is interested in. That is to say, in terms of programming and so on. But there are other things that still need to be done, which I will mention in a minute. But we have had investment from the university. In the last 3 to 4 years, we have doubled our faculty, so that in fact, we have 14 faculty members, and it's one of the most global Africana departments in the country. That is to say, with faculty coming from different parts of the world, and also focusing on subjects of interest all over the world. It's multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, so that in fact, my colleagues are in different fields. And that is something, again, that is very appropriate to a context in Cornell where interdisciplinary study, transdisciplinary study is valued. So all of that is good. But along the way, of course, there's been struggle to get to where we are, because even just a year right after the establishment of Africana, the center was burnt down in 1970. Recently, that site was marked, importantly so. And that is very important for us to remember as we go on about the vulnerabilities of our situations. So that in fact, when we're thinking after the recent elections, which is what I thought we were going to be talking about today, there's certain vulnerabilities there, tides change, but we have to be on guard constantly. So that in fact, when you're thinking of us individually and together, it's good for you to know in terms of your own education that taking a course from one of us is also taking a course from all of us. So we need as many allies as possible in that respect, speaking academically. Now, the other part of it too is it would be very good if there was some message that could be sent to the administration stating clearly that this university is a safe space to be in, because I don't know about on the panel or several of you to know, the results of the election also made me feel we always have known that Ithaca is a bubble. It's a bubble that's been welcoming in many respects, though, but it's also a time when after the elections it does not feel as safe as it used to, so that some word from above, not that that will be, sufficient, but it will help, in the same way that I think Governor Andrew Cuomo came out saying something about the state of New York as a safe state, etc. It would be helpful. In terms of our ongoing difficulties, I don't know if this is the experience of others on the panel. I think that we try our best to offer you the best courses possible with the best faculty possible. We try to be imaginative. Our programming, I think we try to be thinking of the issues that are out there, your interest, and so on. But I know after having been a director for about 3 years at Africana, and especially the time from Ferguson onward, when it was extremely important to put on a certain, the programming so that you could have that space for dialogue. Some of it was successful in the sense that many of you came, successful in the sense that we also began to have relations with the law school, with other departments across, across the university, because these issues are not, departmentally bound. They are affecting us all. But I think one of the difficulties I experienced also was not having enough of you there. So that in fact, what I would put to you as a difficulty that we would want help with is also the issues are important. We know that. We could give you the programming, we could give you the space, but we also need you to give us feedback about what you also think are the issues that we need to be putting on the table for a discussion at the university, because I think it's clear that Cornell will give the space for freedom of expression, but at the same time, we need to have your input, so that is an ongoing sort of situation that we would be very open to hearing from you about what some of our next steps will be. So I'll stop here, and I'm sure other things will come up.
So I'm going to take a different approach, which is talk a little about the history. And first I'm going to hold this up, like, why feminism and gender studies? I don't know. And just to start by saying, we're not supposed to be here. FGSS is not supposed to be here. In the founding of the program, the idea was we wouldn't be here after a while. And I'm very worried that that might come true. In 1969, Cornell held the first conference for women. 2,000 people attended. And this fueled a move to have what was known as a female studies program. Up until that point, women had largely been relegated to the School of Home Economics, where they would be taught to be good homemakers. And they were, in fact, until 1960, almost exclusively not allowed to take regular academic courses. So in 1969, a move started that not only should women be allowed to study more than home economics, but that women should be studied in every discipline. And so a group of women fought to hire women professors, because that was the other motivation for the program, was there were almost no women professors at Cornell, and certainly not outside of the School of Home Economics, that women would be hired into a range of departments: linguistics, history, sociology, psychology. And now we have links to 40 different departments. But at the founding, the goal was that eventually the program would disappear and that women's studies would be taught in a range of disciplines. Well, in the meantime, feminist theory became a really strong element of academic culture. Gender theory became a really strong element of academic culture. Queer theory became, and we realized that not only is it important to study women, but it is important to study women and the LGBT community, but Judith will be talking about that, from the perspective of women in the LGBT community, and in a critical, theoretical, analytical way, so that we're looking at the structures of society and how they function, what the underlying concepts are that fuel some of the structures in society that we need to change, right? But at this point, our program is fueled largely by voluntary cross-listing from various departments. And the problem with depending on other departments to keep gender studies going and feminist and gender studies going is sometimes they lose interest in gender studies. And they say, no, gender studies isn't really important. It's not a real discipline. I mean, all you're doing is studying women, right? Okay. Well, you're not shocked by that? So we're down to 5 joint faculty, which means 2.5 ETEs. We have the equivalent of 2.5 full-time faculty to teach what is a growing program with students knocking down our doors, over-enrolling in our courses, begging to be put in our courses. And we're trying to juggle, LGBT is growing, we're trying to juggle having both programs thrive. We have a major. The major was built in 1993. We have a minor that started in 1983. We have a graduate minor. We have 3 core courses for the major. And we don't have enough faculty to teach them all. So that's very simple right there. At the same time as our weakness is also partly our strength, that we do have to connect with, we're connected with 40 different departments in the university. And one cute little factoid, since 2009, a student from every single department in the university has taken an FGSS course, so that we connect with every single academic unit in the university, which shouldn't surprise us at all, because I think gender and feminism are very important to everybody, and certainly everybody in this room, or you wouldn't be here. So I think, as with Asian American studies, as with American Indian and Indigenous studies, as with Latino studies and LGBT, we really need advocacy. We really need your support, because we're doing important work. We have some of the best scholars in the country working on this. And we need your support to make this program grow, and so that we can offer you the courses you want.
I'm just going to begin by giving a shout out to someone who designed this for me. If you know me, you know that I've been caught up in this punk fest thing. So thank you for that acknowledgement. So talking a little bit about the history of the LGBT Studies program, I'm sure a lot of you are confused. We have an FGSS, Feminist Gender Sexuality Studies program, and why do we have an LGBT, lesbian, whatever it is, gay, bisexual, transgender. So the history of the program is complicated, and we are very much allied with each other and collaborative. But LGBT studies grew out of what was then feminist or women's studies in the 1990s, 1996. And it was determined by a cluster of faculty that women's studies was not doing as much for the gay population, even the lesbian population. Sometimes were antagonistic within a women's studies framework. Now, women's studies traditionally, as sort of the older recognized discipline, is the place where much queer work, gay history, lesbian history, even early trans work emerged under that umbrella. But there were antagonisms. And especially in the AIDS era, when there's a lot of focus on sexual practices of gay men, and that itself became a kind of necessary disciplinary division with the goals of women's studies departments. That's why LGBT studies programs emerged as separate. And it was some years later that the women's studies program here decided to change its name to be more inclusive of sexuality. So in that way, we share a lot of the goals and perhaps represent very much the intersectionality of identity as a structure and a discipline in thinking through culture and structures of power. So, and we have talked a lot, there's been a lot of discussion about whether we should merge. And just recently in this last semester, we had a conversation about it. And one of the things we determined was that no, we shouldn't merge, because why do you want to shrink your footprint of identity politics in the university? It's important to make sure that there is a place for LGBT to be allied with these other programs and also maintain its own sort of space and identity. And this is partly because it is a discipline. It comes out of a set of writings, literature that emerged in the late 80s, early 90s, again around AIDS, but also in the activism that grew up in the queer nation. There's ways in which there's a critique of power structures, primarily through the lens of sexuality. Of course, gender is an important part of that and circulates with sexuality in complicated ways. So that's why there is a lens of thinking about gender as a structure of power relations and sexuality as related, but also somewhat separate methodology of analyzing structures of power and identity. So as a program, we're small. We only have a minor. We have an undergraduate minor and a graduate minor. And often people are choosing the FGSS because it's just a larger program. It's maybe got a little bit more profile in terms of curriculum, but I would urge people to pick up an LGBT minor. It's only 4 classes. They just fill out a form, do both, yeah. Major in FGSS, minor in LGBT.
And minor and
yeah, really, collecting minors. Just tell us. And I'm not kidding, because it's important that we get the numbers. Numbers is everything these days in Cornell and any university. That is, there's a lot of bean counters, what they call, so that the vitality of a program is just about how many butts are in the seats, not according to us, but according to the administration. So what I do is I run a series, a lecture series. I oversee some of the curricular questions of how many LGBT courses we have on the books, and we always have a great number of LGBT courses. We have a program, so that means we don't fund any in departmental lines. We get volunteers from all the other departments, so we're a truly interdisciplinary program. And we rely on the goodwill of these people to participate in our program. Quickly, I would say in terms of challenges, our challenges are like the challenges of all humanities programs. That is, it's asserting ourselves as an important, a vitally and critically important thing to be studying alongside of other disciplines, but something that may not obviously be job training, but certainly will be something that helps you be a better human being in the world. I think that's my thought.
As usual, Latinos are last. So I mean, but anyway, I do want to emphasize some of the things that have been said by all of my colleagues here. And certainly all of our minors, I think, are very, very important. And it's very difficult to visualize someone going to Cornell and spending 4 years and not taking some classes within our programs. In terms of the Latino Studies program, let me say that I was here at the beginning, like God, at the beginning, and it came after lots of thinking about the place of Latinos in the United States up until then. Want you to understand that being Latino in the United States from the 1900s, 40s, 50s, it was being a part of an invisible population. Invisible population. Whenever you saw Latinos in the movies, they always were the bad guys. You know, the black hat and the crisscross guns and bullets and so on, right? That's, if you look at the old cowboy movies of the 1940s and 50s, Latinos were always the bad guys. And so when you think about what that meant for Latinos who were not able to visualize or see themselves in the media of the times, and when they did see themselves, they saw themselves as the bad people. You can imagine, how that worked in the minds of young children growing up in this country. As they went to schools where Spanish was outlawed, you could not speak Spanish, otherwise you could be kicked out of school in this country. And what they learned in school was all about whites, Anglos, and they were not there. They were not there in history, they were not there in reality. their families were breaking up because of the kinds of prejudice that men and women received at the time. So there was a build-up of gangs, of all kinds of social clubs, and so on, as a response, and also as a way of finding some kind of identity. So I personally went to the High School of Performing Arts in New York, and I wanted to be an actor. But guess what? There were no roles for Latinos with accents. And my accent then was even worse than now, believe me. But I realized that there was no way I could find a place in the production end or the performing end of media at that time. And so when I came to Cornell, and I came as a grad student, I got my degree from Cornell. We were very few here at Cornell. But let me say that it took over 100 years for Cornell to provide a course on Latinos. Okay, it was at the time in which there was the Chicano movement. Latinos were making themselves heard. You had Cesar Chavez, who was one of the greatest people that we've had as Latinos. With all that noise, then it came to Cornell, and the Department of Sociology was specifically asked to provide a class for Latinos. Well, they were very happy to do that, but they didn't have anyone who could teach it, so they chose a graduate student. That was me. Okay? And they asked me, "Are you willing to teach a course for us on Latinos?" And so I did. I was very honored to be asked, and I had, I think, all 11 Latinos in campus went to the class. And then as time went on, more and more non-Latinos came to the class. And so that class became the founding stone for what later would become the Latino Studies program. And again, as I say, it took over 100 years. When we finally got a course, other universities had beat us to it throughout this country. And when we got a Latino Studies program, lots of universities already had their Latino Studies program. So in other words, Cornell was not quite a leader in this field. So we have to keep that in mind. However, we started a program, I believe it was 87, and that program started rather small, very small. It was at the time, as you remember, in '93, where we had the whole takeover. It was basically Latino students who took over Day Hall. I was involved in that, not that I was protesting with the flag, but I was there as a member of the faculty to make sure that nothing happened to the students. And as a matter of fact, there were students, even from Ithaca College, that were involved in that, and I nicely took them out of being there because I was afraid of what might happen if, the worst things came to happen, the police or whatever, and they would end up worse than Cornell students, because at least Cornell students are on their own campus. But here we have outsiders coming in. So, but out of that, we got the Latino Living Center. And the Latino Living Center was hooked up to the Latino Studies program. And that was very nice. I mean, we had a Latino Living Center as we do today. But at that time, since it was linked up to the program, we had a very hard time finding anybody who wanted to be director, who wanted to take over not only a program, a budding, nascent program, but also a residential center. And so we had a very difficult time, and lots of students got very angry at that, and we had all kinds of demonstrations. And finally, we decided to unhook these two things. In terms of paperwork, they are two separate entities, although certainly we are still united in so many ways. But where we are at right now, we have a minor for undergraduates and for graduates. And we have, at this point, I believe, faculty to teach those, to fulfill the needs of those students who want to minor in Latino studies. And again, I would ask you, think about it before you graduate. Minor. The course I taught back then, the first one in the history of Cornell, is still being taught by me. Not the same way, of course, because times have changed. And we are in a very dangerous times. And I also, like Gerard, thought that we're going to be speaking a little bit more about where we stand today and the danger that so many of us are facing. And so our program has to adapt itself to confront this new, the new thinking and the new experiences and the expectations that so many of us have, or perhaps the lack of expectations, the confusion that we have. I think I see that happening in my class too. My students say,
I used to students in IOR and would say something. All right, I just want to mark that there is nobody from disability studies here because there is no comprehensive disability studies program on this campus. There is no disability studies program in arts and sciences. There is an employment and disability institute, but it only focuses on employment law. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So really quick, we don't unfortunately have time for Q&A, but what we're going to do is we're going to move into our small group discussions. So what that looks like is going to look like is if you can group together in about groups of 8 to 10 people with people around you, one member of the faculty will join you and you can ask them any questions that you might have and also discuss these questions. But yes, so.
Thank you to the faculty for speaking to us, for showing us that intersection of our programs is very important for support, but that is also important to be able to stand by ourselves.
I just have one announcement to make. I'm Professor Elias. I'm in English Language Studies. And we are actually meeting and we are drafting the letter and we will release it to you all. We will all sign it and we will put our years and you will distribute it in your network. Okay, we're doing that on Friday.
And so after the small group discussions, or even now, you feel free to come up. There are cards in the front and you can sign your name. And maybe like a short or long reason why that specific program. These cards will be posted to
Gretchen Ritter, the Dean of Arts and Sciences.
her office.
And Dean Moore.
At that office.
Or can you announce the day hall takeover membership?
I mean, yeah.
Well, I mean, just because you Emily. Just wanted to remind you about this. I didn't know if you wanted to.